Okay, darlings, happy to see you all. Mary, hello. Anna, hello. Everybody, hello. Alona, everybody. Dylan's there. Hello, Dylan. All you darling people. Thank you so much. So, shall I start? Shall I start?
Yes, please, Venerable.
Okay. Well, we're here. Here we are for about an hour, maybe. Time goes very quickly. You'll see. Within a second, I'll be saying goodbye. So let's make the most of this 60 minutes. And how we do that is by just listening, seeing, and I'm trying to give advice coming from the Buddha. I don't want to make it up. It's my advice, but channeled from the Buddha through my Australian voice. Okay. So it's advice that we can, taking from the Buddha's teachings, how to put it on the earth, how to apply it in daily life. So the essence of it is, the essence of all of Buddha's advice is to help us, you could say it this way, break down the barriers between self and other. One way of saying it, I mean, Buddha's saying that because we have all these attachment and ego and feeling and neuroses and depression and worries and anxieties, which are totally normal, join the universe. But he's found that these can be removed. And the reason you'd want to remove them is because they make you miserable. They're the source of your suffering. They're the reason we harm others. And so they are what cut us off from others, I mean, and the idea that they say when you really accomplish the goal, when you've really done this job that Buddha says we're capable of, and the word is Buddha, I mean, way to go, time to go. It seems always too weird for us in ordinary human terms, in ordinary psychological terms, that there'd be no longer a sense of a separate self. I mean, that sounds we would think that's mental illness, like you're confused. Who am I? I don't know. I'm everybody. No, it seems very abstract, but it's kind of powerful concept. But putting it on the earth, it means that there wouldn't be this, you wouldn't have loneliness. You wouldn't be depressed. You wouldn't be angry. Think of those qualities. They're always the feelings when you're feeling separate, bereft, on your own, all the world out there. It's either threatening and horrible, or it's sad and you're lonely. Look at the energy of all these unhappy states of mind. It's like that. So there's all sorts of practices, especially on the compassion wing. We talk about the wisdom wing and the compassion wing, and the compassion wing is the what they call Mahayana Buddhist approach. It's the one of the bodhisattva. It's a word in Sanskrit that really the best is you could just translate it like saint. I mean, when I was a Catholic, a little girl, I was in love with God, and I was in love with all the saints because they're the people who are, the examples. I mean, I had all these heroes. So bodhisattva is a person who's really done the job of the wisdom wing, already radically lessened all the neuroses, lessened all the delusions, is far more content and fulfilled, because that's one of the immediate benefits of getting rid of the rubbish in your mind. You are the beneficiary, do not doubt it. And then there's a sense of connectedness with others. And then there becomes a fierce sense of wanting to help others, because we realize everybody's lost. Everybody's in the same boat. Everyone's looking around, trying to what's happiness, what's suffering. And the Buddha's sort of saying we're looking in the wrong direction, we should be looking in here. So when you're on the bodhisattva path, there's all these different approaches to help break down these barriers, There's one set of teachings, they call it the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. This is sort of the bodhisattva is this person who's gone to a certain level of realization and who now is bopping along life after life after life, because of course we know Buddha asserts many lifetimes. Consciousness did not begin in our mother's womb and it won't end when we die. This is Buddha's view. And this view's been around for several thousand years in India, of course, as we know, So they've got this fierce determination to never give up helping others. So there's different levels of practices. So what they talk about, one of the first practices of the bodhisattva in relation to sentient beings to help break down these barriers that divide us, which are internal, is generosity, giving, generosity. And it sounds kind of an odd thing to pluck out of all the different things you can think of, to think, well, generosity, what does that mean? Well, I mean, it's sort of obvious. You think about it. If we're feeling lonely, if we feel kind of depressed, if we feel kind of fearful, insecure, I mean, it often manifests in feeling we don't have enough, and we very well might have very little in terms of material things, in particular money, because money is the label, money is the entity that we use in our culture, in the world. We don't, you don't you don't barter your cows for my rice anymore, anymore. You might, but usually this thing we call money. And it's very powerful, isn't it? It's a very powerful concept, money. So we either think we don't have enough of it, or we are really irresponsible with it, or we feel, we can't, therefore one of the commonest ones is therefore we don't like to give it. I'm sure we've talked about this recently, but this came up to me today to talk about it. And so it's a symptom, isn't it, of a very unhappy person. Think about it. I mean, who would be miserly as a person who's full of fear? We tend to think, oh, you can't give because you're poor. Not true. I mean, I know we all know in the world there are mega rich people who are the meanest, most miserly people on the planet. And there are some of the poorest people who just have generous hearts, who'd give whatever they've got. It's so clear. It starts in the mind, It's got nothing to do with how much you've got. It's an attitude. So this is something to really cultivate. And so, of course, the direct beneficiary of generosity is others. But who do you think also is a beneficiary? Oneself. If we can have an attitude, all the bodhisattva practices are like, what can I do to help? The fundamental idea of a bodhisattva is there's a sense of responsibility. And it's very courageous. We discussed this in our course recently. It's a very courageous attitude. Instead of some people, when they're very sad and lonely, always look around the world and go, nobody helps me. Nobody talks to me. I've got nobody to love me. We think this way, and it's very strong, isn't it? And it's very true. You feel very lonely, but you're always wondering what others should be doing for you. Well, the bodhisattva attitude is the reverse, What can I do for others? We know these views, and they're not necessarily easy, especially if we are sad and lonely. We really can't see it. And in terms of, generosity is a very powerful one, because it's if you can be generous with material things, it means you're generous with your own time. You're giving material things is like the first level of generosity. Giving your time, helping others is, in a sense, generosity. When you see someone needs something, what can I do to help? Not, oh, I wonder who can help that person. So, and that is courageous, because the world is full of suffering. Look at the world. I mean, it's overwhelming. And then we get all this guilt. Well, I can't help many people. What can I do? I've only got a certain amount of money. Well, of course, you do what you can. You do what you can. You help who you can, You give what you can. But it's a very powerful practice. And we've got to start in the mind. But what I look at the deep instinct we have, and this is not normal among everybody. There's, pretty common that we don't like to give things. The only ones we like to give to are our beloveds. And of course, we have a vested interest, don't we? I'm attached to you. I'll give you anything. But if you stop being my friend, I'm going to stop giving you, baby. I'm sorry, you're not going to get my things because you're not fulfilling my needs. So we are generous only to our beloveds, and even then, not even to our beloveds sometimes, Or we make it like a political thing. Well, if you do this and this, I'll give you this and this, We use it as like a tool. But it's a very powerful practice for oneself to open ourselves up, to break down these artificial barriers that delusions have created between self and other. And initially, of course, it's tiring to think, I've got to love everybody. I mean, this is the Bodhisattva path, is saying we've got the capacity. Buddhist teachings, and they're all very articulate about this, showing the logic that we've got the capacity to have love and compassion for every living being. And of course, you've got to look at that, because it's quite a shocking concept, But generosity is a very powerful one to start with, and not using it as a political weapon, not using it as some, oh, look at me, I'm so generous, not like that. But we can really see it doesn't necessarily come naturally, because we have so much fear about not having enough. So, one of the things that I found, I think I talked about this in that course. We talked about this in that course. No, ages ago, we talked about this. I remember when I ran the Liberation Prison Project, when it started back in the mid-90s, and I was based in San Francisco. And we got a letter, from this young prisoner. And then this whole project started from that. And of course, prisoners, anybody else will email and say, can you tell me what book to read? And you'll give them the name and they can go buy it. But prisoners have nothing, and most have nothing, They're mostly poor, working class. It's 99, I'd say 95% of people in prison. I really, really mean that. Unless you're, maybe the rich ones are the psychopaths. But if you're rich enough, you manage to, like I don't joke, it's serious. I've never met a rich person on death row. Never, I promise you. So it's always the poor people. So prisoners have nothing, and you've got to put all this effort into giving them what they said. These letters would come, these letters, and it was so clear the need was incredible. These young people, mostly young men who wrote. For some reason, women didn't write that often. I don't know why. And there's plenty of women in prison, certainly in the States. And these, I mean, you could see they were desperate, like these young guys, these young Latino ex-gangsters sitting in their cells 23 hours a day with nothing and nobody. And they've got one book from their library, and that's how they got our address, and they'd write, and they really wanted something. So you could feel the need was there. So this is something, for me, it was a really powerful practice, because when I was editing Mandala magazine, the FPMT magazine, I think it doesn't exist anymore. It's a bit sad. Back in the 90s, this is how we got our first letter. This young prisoner had read a book in the library that had our name in it. So he wrote. So then I sent him a book, and it grew from there, But I couldn't just give him the name of a book. I had to buy the book and give it to him. Now, there was no budget. I mean, I was living on a couple of $100 a month and my board and keep. There was nothing in the budget for Mandala magazine to help prisoners, but these letters kept coming. So by the end of the 1 year, I had 40 people writing. And so when you read each of these letters, they were so sincere in their wish. So how can I say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you? I didn't have the money. I personally didn't have the money. Mandela had no budget. But what can you do? This is the point where you really are stretched. So I started developing this view, this attitude, the way the bodhisattvas think, tried to do it. I remember Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when somebody gave me some money, at some point gave me some money, she sold her house, and then she gave me some money, and I always quote this story, and she had a crystal, and she wanted Lama Zopa to write a little mantra on the crystal to help sell the house, to get the funds. And Rinpoche said to her, don't think of receiving, think of giving. So now that's the motto I use for my Bodhicitta Trust, which helps different projects. Don't think. So this is the attitude. So I started to realize, and this is how you have to think through. A letter would come, and I'd look in my pocket, there's nothing. I look in Mandela's budget, there was nothing. But I would read the letter, and it came on, and this is the thing, it came on my desk. It wasn't somebody else's desk. It's my person. This person, I had the karma with this person to come to my desk. I couldn't look around and go, oh, well, who's going to help them? So I had to start saying, instead of the usual one is this, someone asks for something, you look in your pocket, you can't find the money. I'm sorry, I haven't got the money, I can't give it. That's the usual one we say. But then I realized you had to change the thinking. I had to go, I will give you a book. I will send you a book. I had no means, but the need was so strong. So you have to have the courage to say, I will send you a book. And once you say, I will give it, then you find the means to get it, rather than, oh, I haven't got it, I can't do it, and you close the door. So whether that's a homeless person, your sister asking for something, it's an attitude we've got to start cultivating, to grab our mind, to catch that immediate one is, oh, I haven't got it, I'm sorry, I can't help. But to think, I will give, and then I'll find the means to do it. Not, I haven't got it, I can't do it. And that's really a big shift in the mind, So there's always lots of opportunities in our daily life to give beyond the usual, but to make it in other words, to make it a practice that you add to your little toolkit of practices. Not just working on your mind, being mindful, yes, be your own therapist, all of this. But this is a practice where you're thinking of others, and you start with the thought, I want to give. So, of course, in the West, it's very organized. We have all these NGOs, we have nonprofits. You can get your tax breaks, nothing wrong. It's very skillful. But you've got to decide to put it into your budget. So I know when I worked on the prison project, what I noticed was most people have no idea about their money. Either you think they either think, because I used to do, people would come, I had at some point 9 full-time staff, we paid salaries and everything at that point back then. And I remember I'd help people with their budgets, and most people just don't do budgets. One of the common ones, I've mentioned this, was people have student debt, masses of it, and because we think it's all these rich credit card companies, these rich banks, they don't care. So we just give up on it. But again, you've got to see what that attitude does to your own mind. If you mean and don't want to pay a debt, okay, negotiate with the credit card companies, but at least treat money with respect. Often we don't know what we spend, or we think we're so generous because we give it all away. This one person, when I got her to do her budget, I saw in her budget, I said, do you have any credit card debt? Oh, yes, I've got student debt, $40,000. I said, where are the repayments in your budget? No, I don't pay it back. But she had a line item giving to poor people. So on the one hand, being generous, but on the other hand, blocking your own karma, blocking your own ability to receive by not paying debt. It's really important attitude. You've got to have incredibly moral attitude to money, only because money is the tool that we use. That's all. It's just the language we use. There's nothing inherent about money, you know. But it's a really important practice to be very honest in your own mind, very authentic, very clear, very moral, very ethical with money, every cent. And then to organize it well, and then to start thinking, I want to give. So add a line item, be like the Mormons, offer 10%, offer 1%. Because usually we'll say, oh, no, I can't afford it. I haven't got it. We don't even know how much we can afford because we've not done our numbers. This is the commonest thing among most people I know. We don't do our budgets properly. Either we think, you know, you might earn lots of money, but you don't respect it. You just spend it. Oh, I spend it because I can, but you don't organize it properly. And if you understand karma, every cent you have is the fruit not just of your hard work, but of your past generosity. Karma is always the first cause for everything. So having even access to 1 cent is that much past generosity. So by just misusing it and wasting it and being cavalier with it or being mean with it it's like tipping it down the toilet, you know. And I found this by running the prison project. I had to be incredibly, because every cent did count. Every cent did count. So it's really precious. I don't mean to be not miserly, but very kind of wise. And because you know it's the fruit of past karma, you want to keep creating more generosity. And that keeps putting petrol in the tank, you know, of your own generosities. Then you will see, you'll start to receive. You'll always have money when you need it. Ethics is incredibly important, to have ethics in relation to money. And most of us don't. We don't pay credit card debts. We don't really know what we've got. We don't really know what we're spending and how we're spending it. I mean, there's another way to be neurotic about it. You know, you can be absolutely like freaking out every second, but that's not being skillful. It's being wise and strategic, but having an attitude of understanding it's the fruit of generosity and wanting to continue being generous. Even in your mind. I always remember this story. The lamas tell it, you know, one of these many stories. They never have sources for them. They just come down, they pass down verbally. At one puja, there was one, you know, in the Tibetan, they call the benefactor. The people, it's a very medieval system, you know. So people benefact, people give money to support that particular puja. They offer this to the monks, offer this to the teacher. And the benefactors are treated very respectfully. They're called the jindak, I think, in Tibetan. And they sit in the front row, you know. And they're usually kind of important people, whatever. So this, at the end of some puja, the lama, he must have been clairvoyant. There was a little, the jindak was coming with all his gifts, giving all his gifts, you know, and being praised and thanked. And then the lama said something like, the little beggar at the back, he said, the beggar in the back row has created much more merit just because he had the thought, how marvelous this person is able to give all this. I'm so happy for them. I wish I could give like that. So even an attitude of giving is unbelievable. And everything always starts with the mind. Your hand will not go in your pocket and give $5 to a beggar unless your thought says it. So it starts with the thought. It starts, and it's a very specific practice. We tend to think, oh, I'm generous. Yeah, I'll give money. But you haven't made it a specific practice. You should put it in your practice toolkit. It's a practice you should think. And it's an attitude to cultivate. That when you see others, you see the ant, the dog, the human, you're thinking, and this is how you practice it. You know, what can I do? What can I give? You don't run around being holy about it and showing, you know, throwing dollars in the street. You've got that attitude. You have to bring that attitude to the front of your mind. What can I give? It's very powerful. And this is the first step in the 6 perfections, the beginning of the opening up, of the breaking down of the barriers between self and other. You know, it's very, very marvelous practice. So that's a thought. So any questions about that? What do you think? Any discussion on that one? Giving is the cause of receiving, you know. They say, there's a wonderful saying among the yogis in the mountains, in their caves, if you're really practicing, the food will roll up the hill to you. It's very powerful. concept, you know. But what I'm really talking about is looking into the mind and developing the attitude, the thought, cultivating consciously the thought. Yes, well, I want to try and be like a bodhisattva, and it's my job to think, you know, what can I give? What can I give? What can I give? Instead of seeing sentient beings, which is the self-centered way we tend to think of sentient beings, only in terms of our own needs. You know, it's quite a conscious practice to cultivate, starting with the mind, you know. What do you think? Anybody? Any thoughts? No? Yes, somebody. There's Dylan. Yes, Dylan.
Thank you, Venerable. I'm wondering if a poor person or just somebody that didn't have the means, if going to the pound and rescuing a dog or a cat might be, it's kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Giving, that's even, they even call that. They even, you know, there's like different levels of giving. They list it out in the teachings, giving material things, giving spiritual advice, and they call that one giving protection, helping people be released from prison, saving that little fly before it goes down the water in the sink, saving a little animal from death. Unbelievably powerful practice. Yeah, absolutely. But still, my feeling is, we are poor, many of us are poor and really struggle to survive. So, but if we cultivate the attitude of wanting to give, even 5 cents, not just, oh, I can't afford money, because we treat money very powerfully, you know, but even it has to also include, even if it is a small amount, the attitude can be much more powerful. And that's for that person, that's much more generosity karma than a person who can afford $100 who gives it, but, you know, with kind of arrogance or something. So yes, of course, absolutely, Dylan, it's a really good practice. But the fundamental point I'm trying to get clear is it starts with the attitude of feeling that here you are, and that's why the brave attitude of a bodhisattva is, what can I do? How can I help? What can I do? You know, instead of just, oh, I can't afford it, I can't do it, and turning our back. It's quite a powerful attitude to cultivate. But yes, absolutely, you're exactly right. That's giving protection. It's a wonderful practice. What else, people? Yes. Who is that? X. Talk to me. Hello.
Thank you. What do you do when you approach life with that mindset of giving and giving and giving?
Yes.
And the people around you don't hold that same mentality.
That's right. No, it's a really good question. It's a really good question. And this is where we have to start looking at, because one of the commonest things, and it's a very common for some people who've got good hearts, who are kind and generous, but end up being misused and abused by others. This is a really common one. So the Buddhist approach to that one is, we've got to, you know, there's this analogy I'm always using, and it really is a way of framing all of Buddha's teachings, but in a very particular order, that there's a bird needs 2 wings, wisdom and compassion. So the compassion wing is necessarily more advanced. So if we are still at the level of where we haven't done much inner work, and but we're one of those kind people, and we're always mummy's little helper, and we're very kind and generous, but people misuse us and abuse us. Now, this happens, it's so common, but the problem is there. We have to start looking into our own mind and noticing that actually our generosity and our kindness, which are very real, but are also polluted by our own emotional neediness, which is attachment, to be seen as a good girl. That's what makes us vulnerable. And then we feel this, it's not fair, I'm always giving, but nobody ever gives to me. That also is an unhealthy attitude, because we haven't done the inner work. So this giving attitude is an attitude to grow, but it's got to be wise and strategic. So if you've got the right attitude, somebody around you is always misusing you, and they say, oh, can I have $10? It might be the wisest thing to say, no, I cannot give you $10, because if we're coming from the neediness, we'll give the $10 all the time, but it's not helpful for the person. It's not helpful at all. And so it's a really fine point that I'm trying to make. Are we communicating? Do you understand my point? Good. I'm very happy. So we've got to really look into ourselves. So in other words, a lot of us are generous and are kind, but we haven't done the work yet on giving up the attachment. And we're seeing ourselves, I'm a good girl. And then they're the ones who get misused and abused and used like a doormat. And so it's like a mother who always will give to her child, but it's completely unwise. She's got to have the wisdom to say no. In other words, giving isn't just this open-ended, give everything. It's got to be wise. It's got to come from some intelligence and according to what's most beneficial for the other person as well. And that's a tough one. Then our giving, but in general, still to develop this attitude of wanting to give, but then giving strategically, giving wisely. That's a very good point. Thank you so much. Who else? In fact, this is a massive point. It's like a discussion we had a few days ago, and Anna said, but at a certain level of practice, we discussed those really heavy duty practices. And Anna said, no, you mean but it says I'm supposed to do it. But I mean, it's just dependent arising, if it's you're only in grade 1 in your spiritual practice, and this is a grade 12 practice, I'm sorry, you don't do it. We've got to understand where it's coming from and how it's a marvelous attitude in general to act like the bodhisattvas, who are the people who think it's my job to help others. What can I do? But clearly they've got wisdom. That's the attitude. That's just such a good point. Thank you. Yes, people. Anybody else? While I'm blowing my nose, you can think of some questions. No, this is, yes, Lou. Good, Lou.
This is just a general karma question.
Yeah.
If I was born with the karma that I'm going to be stolen from all during my life because I used to steal in the past life.
That's right, exactly.
Does that mean that I attract thieves? Is there some kind of
Of course it would be. No, there's no question.
Karma given off?
No, of course, absolutely, Lou, because you see, karma is very personal. We don't see that if we just think we've got one life. But if you keep getting stolen from, they are very specific instances. Each one of those people, there's no way that they could steal from you or even want to steal from you if you hadn't stolen from them. So karma is very specific. It's, it's related to others, stealing especially because it's taking somebody's possessions. Absolutely. Very much.
So the next question I would have is it should I feel regret that I'm causing this person?
Absolutely. That's the bodhisattva's attitude. That's the bodhisattva's attitude, Lou. This is a really powerful attitude. I mean, it's very hard if someone's abusing us and you're saying, I feel responsible, but that's really the bodhisattva attitude. They're so wise and so developed in their spiritual practice that they know there's the karma between them and there's a person who's really angry with them, let's say. They have real sense of regret that they are one of the causes from the past by being mean to that person. This person now is compelled to be harmful back. Absolutely, Lou. Very powerful.
And should I be, so in that case, I should be even more compassionate and more willing to help them before
that's exactly right.
Somebody who's close to me.
That's exactly right. Or no, that person. But that's the other thing. Let's say someone holds you up with a gun and they want your money. Well, that's due to karma. But that doesn't mean you can have compassion, but that doesn't mean you should give them any money. It depends on the skill. You got to decide what's best. But you would have compassion for that person, but you'd also be wise. If they're going to shoot you in the head if you don't give $5, give them their $5. So that's the attitude, because karma is very personal, Lou, and that's why the more we understand that, the more it really informs the bodhisattva path. And this is where also, Lou, the bodhisattvas going from life after life after life, one of their main jobs is to connect with sentient beings, eyeball to eyeball, one at a time. Because then once you've got a karmic connection with them, when they're ready to be led to enlightenment 45 lives later, you'll meet them again, they'll recognize you, and you'll be able to lead them to enlightenment. So you need connections with people. Bodhisattvas, look at the Dalai Lama. Millions of people on this planet adore him. We think, oh, aren't we clever? We can recognize a holy being, but no, he has hooked us. Through lifetime after lifetime, he has personally hooked each one of us by some particular interaction. So we got a karmic connection with him. And now in this life, we hear his name and we're ready for him, and now he can lead us to enlightenment. So this is a very powerful thing. That's where another whole approach from this comes. If people don't like you, we get so hurt and offended. But another part of us, be happy. We made a karmic connection. They won't forget us. So may I lead you to enlightenment when you're ready, 54 lifetime, you know? So it's a very, the Bodhisattva attitude is a very powerful one. There's lots to talk about on that one, which we haven't even talked much about, but it's very marvelous.
Thank
So
you, Venerable Bruna.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you so much. Yes, people. Yes, Vicky, darling.
Good morning, Venerable.
Good. Oh, who's this? Christine. Alona.
Christine.
Christine, hello,
Good
Christine. Yes, talk.
Hello.
to me.
So I'm trying to, and excuse the phrase, I'm trying to not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Very good. I like it.
I'm trying to take what I have learned in my totality of Buddhist practice.
Yep.
And separate the human existence, which may have led to areas of inappropriate behavior or actions, without being attached and identifying all of it as bad. And yet I find myself having this sense of anger because there were parts that were very deceiving. And how do you move past that?
I understand. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So basically what you're saying is if there's a person who's been abused or harmed, especially a person who we thought was spiritual, who's ended up harming us. Is that what you're basically saying?
Yes, Venerable.
Okay, darling, I understand exactly, Christine. I understand exactly. This is a common thing in the world, you know. So this is why the wisdom wing absolutely has to come first. And this is why the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, which is such a difficult one for us in the modern world, because it's not our history. We go back to the Greeks. There's no concept, I don't think, in our modern culture of anything to do with reincarnation. That's only in Asia, you know, but we don't know anything about it. It's not in our history. It's not in our bones. Whereas, you know, if you're Tibetan, if you're Indian, this has been around Chinese, not so much Chinese. That's the concept of consciousness going back and back and back and forward, life after life, and therefore the law of karma, and therefore the concept of no creator, and therefore the concept of no punisher and no rewarder, that it's a natural law that all of us have got a beginningless mind, and every single thing that we ever think and do and say programs us and produces our future experiences. So our negative actions produce our suffering experiences in the future, and our positive actions produce our happy experiences in the future. This is absolutely the root of all Buddha's teachings. And from there on, we can start to grow. So if we don't have a sound understanding of karma, then that's why we are brokenhearted and angry when bad things happen, because the energy of anger is, how dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. Now, in this life, I don't deserve it. But if I take the view that my mind goes back to beginningless time, and I've got karmic connections with millions of people, and that everything I experience is necessarily the fruit of my past actions, when that's a strong thing in our practice, then the anger will not arise. We'll know why it happened, and then we'll be able to move forward and heal from it. This is the basis, Christine, and it's a tough one for us in the modern world. What do you think, Doc?
I sense a specific for you in the chat room for you to see only.
Yes.
So that you have an idea maybe of where I'm coming from.
Yes. Okay.
And I'm just,
darling. I understand exactly. I understand exactly, darling. I understand. So how do you feel about what I just said? Is this something you've looked deeply into? Because I know you might not have heard many of those teachings beforehand, and that's just not criticizing, because
right, of course, right.
But no, that's the basis. If you look at the Dalai Lama and you look at the Tibetans and look at the amount of suffering they've had, this is the interesting point, Christine. They don't have much anger. That's why I always use this example of these two young nuns. I quote this story a lot. I don't know if you've heard me tell this story. These two young Tibetan nuns, they were invited by Richard Gere to New York when the Dalai Lama was there. He invited Dalai Lama in 2003. And when I was working for the prison project, Richard Gere also invited 20 former prisoners, Americans, black, white, male, female, Puerto Rican, whatever. And everybody's talking about all their suffering. And these two young Tibetan nuns had been tortured and sexually abused in prison in Tibet. But what was evident to all the Americans was so clear that these young women did not have anger. And this is the point about what anger is. And we don't think this way in our culture. But when we unpack it from the Buddhist perspective, anger is this intense outrage, How dare that happen? I don't deserve it. Now, within one lifetime, clearly those young women didn't even know these Chinese communist guards who abused and tortured them. But because they have karma in the bones of their being, it's completely natural. In the same way that in our culture, we just take it for granted that mummy and daddy made us, and that's what we track back for our problems. But for the Buddhists, for these Tibetans, the view of karma is so integrated into their view of the world. It's just natural. So for them, they knew they had past life karma with these two guards. They knew. And so one of them then said, and of course we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past. This is the basis of Buddha's teachings, but many of the Buddhist traditions don't teach it much, and therefore it's a really tough one. We can't hear it properly. But when we've got that really grounded in our mind, then we know why we ran into this group of people. We know why we became connected because we've got a karmic connection, and we know why these bad things happened. But what's also interesting, Christine, this applies also to all the good things that happen to us. But the tragedy is we never ask, why do good things happen? We're only shocked when the bad things happen. But it's everything, all of our happiness, any moment in your life of anything good that has happened, it's because of your past virtue. So then when we know karma like this, we can own all the good things and rejoice in all the good things. And then we can more easily understand the bad things and bear them and know why they happened and move on. It's a tough one, but it's the absolute basis in Buddhist practice, Christine. I don't know, darling, what do you think?
That makes, I absolutely agree, wholeheartly understand what it is that you're saying. I mean, you are correct. It wasn't all bad.
Sorry, let me just finish this to make your point. Then I want to hear you say something. Your point about chucking the baby out of the bathwater. The point about this is this. This doesn't mean you then become a little sitting duck and a victim, but it's still wrong what people do. If you get abused by somebody, it's still wrong they abused you. But all karma is an explanation of why it happened, and that puts us into the relationship. And then if you still have to, if somebody does abusing, if someone steals, you might still take them to court, but it would be from a very compassionate view because it's just appropriate. You act according to the world's laws, I know one time in one particular Lama was accused of abuse or something, and the Dalai Lama said, yes, that's completely mistaken. He should be taken into account. But that doesn't mean that we still can't take responsibility from our side due to past karma. So that's where you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't mean you become a victim. That would be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You see my point, Christine?
Absolutely, I see your point.
Good.
I'm trying to move past that sense of frustration and anger and be compassionate.
Exactly. Yes, but before compassion, honey, you got to really look at your own mind and really heal yourself, because it's real. If you've been abused, it's real that you were abused. So you've got to heal yourself first. Compassion will come later, darling. Don't jump into compassion. That's more advanced. You've got to have compassion for yourself first and take responsibility and do your purification practices and realize it's due to past karma. That's how you heal yourself first. Compassion will come later, honey. Don't leap ahead of yourself. It's really important. Let's say you've had an abusive husband for 10 years. Compassion is not, you've got to get the hell out of that relationship. That's self-respect. You heal your own stuff. Don't worry about compassion. Damn him, When you're ready, you'll have compassion. But you've got to heal yourself first and have compassion for yourself first. Get my point?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Venerable. Thank you.
Good, Christine. Thank you for bringing it up. It's a really important point. Thank you so much. I mean, the world is full of suffering. People do terrible things to each other. So-called spiritual people, non-spiritual. This is the suffering of the world. But when we understand the karmic connections with each other, this is the Buddhist explanation, I mean, from the materialist point of view, check this, everybody. The way we suffer is when we go crazy. Why did this happen? I don't deserve it. And then we look at the world and we see innocent young people being murdered, abused, raped, and animals. Then we say, why is that happening? In other words, we literally do not have an answer. We don't have an explanation. If you're a really devoted Christian or a really devoted Muslim, you would say it is God's will and you would be content. And that's profound. But in the materialist view, there's no answer. This is the Buddha's view. This is why, as the Dalai Lama said, he's really sad these days because more and more Tibetans are getting angry. They didn't have anger before. And when you understand anger, like I said, for those young nuns, it's because they have the view of karma. When you know you have a role in everything that happens to you, you're not an innocent victim. it's heavy duty words, then you don't get angry, but you own it. You take responsibility. You heal it. You heal yourself, because it's very brutal to be abused. You've got to heal yourself first. That's like having compassion for yourself. Then you can begin to have compassion for others. That was the basis for those young Tibetan nuns, because the view of karma is so integrated into their lives. So it's quite profound, actually, but it's the hardest one. It's the hardest one for our culture, because we can't hear it properly. And also because we hear it as punishment. But in Buddhism, there is no punisher, because there is no creator. This is the view of ego. We believe there's this outside world doing it to us. I'm an innocent victim. How dare that happen to me? So we've got to really look at this stuff quite deeply. Yes, Alona. Yes, sweetheart.
Hi, Venerable.
Yes.
Thank you for teaching.
Good, darling.
About the money subject, I was wondering, I send money to my mom every month, to help her. And but in her eyes, it's never enough.
Yes.
And she always said that you have so much. And
Yes.
it's like, I need more and more. And it's I'm not giving her because I want her approval. I know I giving her out of generosity.
Yes,
what
good.
she done for me. It's
Good.
like it comes from different part. How
Yes.
can I deal with that? She doesn't stop,
No, I know
she's
that,
like
darling. This is
so
where
intense.
I hear it, sweetheart. Alona, this is again where the wisdom has to come in. You see, this is a very interesting point, whether it's generosity, whether it's being kind to your mother. Some people, our darling mummies often, they're human beings, that's all. They're human beings with attachment. So that from her point of view, that attachment is the energy of never being satisfied, always being dissatisfied. And that's the deepest suffering we all have. That's the suffering of attachment. We never feel we have enough. We never feel people give us enough. We always feel we are not enough. So clearly she has the terrible suffering of that. And there you are, her daughter, in a country where she thinks you're making millions of dollars, and she's living in a poor country. And because she's always dissatisfied, she's always complaining. So now this is the point. This is where we get into these terrible relationships, especially with our mummies, because we want to please mummy. Since a little girl alone is trying to please her mummy, because that's your attachment to being seen as a good girl. So if your mother never satisfied with whatever you do, then that's very distressing for you. But you've got to realize that's your attachment to being seen as a good girl. You want her to approve of you, basically. So you're upset because you keep wanting to make your mother happy. You keep giving her money and you're hoping she'll say, oh, Alona, you're so kind, but she's always complaining. So then you have got to decide that's her suffering. And it's not your job is to want to give to your mother. Your job is to want to make your mother happy, but you can't make her happy. She has to make herself happy. So you have to accept that's in other words, don't judge yourself by the fact that your mother's never happy. And that's what we do. You always think, well, I must have failed again because mummy's not happy. This is a really powerfully important point. You are doing everything you can. You mean it sincerely. You are giving her what you can afford. Let her be miserable and have compassion for her. In other words, her unhappiness has got zero to do with you. It's a very powerful point. You understand?
Yes, I do.
In other words, you be kind to somebody, even anybody, and we expect them to say thank you. We expect them to say, oh, Alona, you're a kind person. That's our attachment to approval, darling. And so stop expecting her to be happy and give her what you can and love her for who she is and have compassion for her poor heart. Do you understand?
Yes, absolutely.
This is what cuts that terrible pain between mummies and children.
Yes.
Understand, darling?
Yes, absolutely.
In other words, and then what happens is we usually have all this guilt, and then we keep giving more, hoping next time she'll be happy. You can feed her your blood daily, she still won't be happy, and it'll just be never-ending nightmare. So you have to give up your attachment to her being happy. Give up your attachment to her thanking you. Because we assume because she's not happy that you failed. You have not failed.
Yes.
You understand, darling?
Absolutely.
This is huge.
Yes.
This is so subtle in the mind. The attachment to being approved of is the basis of so much of our pain, Thank
Yes.
you, Eliza. Very good.
Thank
darling.
you.
What else, dearest people? Yes, dear people, what else? So that's okay. Nothing, no need to worry. So I just, yeah, there's just so many things we're discussing here. The generosity we started with. And now this is, this one that Alona brought up is the one of the expectations. And that's where our generosity can be polluted, whether it's, giving to organizations, giving to poor people, giving to your friend. So often when it's to do with our own need to be seen as a good girl, then that pollutes it completely and makes us miserable. And then we start using it as a weapon, I'll only give to you, mum, if you do this and this and this, and that's really terrible. And people can sometimes, when you hear nightmare stories about when people die and the mummy and daddy's will, and it's like used as a weapon. And then the children all there shouting and yelling and fighting over getting mummy's and daddy's approval so they can get the money. I mean, terrible stuff. When it's related to ego, it's a disaster. When it's related to attachment, to being seen as an important or good person, or even just being thanked, it's a disaster. We get so caught up in misery. Yes, hello, Beth. How are you, darling?
Hello. I wanted to say, maybe ask if I'm understanding this right about part of generosity.
Okay, good.
So generosity is like, if I'm understanding this right, I am deciding from my part, I am showing up to every situation wanting to give. Is that correct?
It's cultivating the view that I want. It's like the beginning of the bodhisattva, a feeling. You see, a bodhisattva feel like a mother. If you had a child, you don't have to be told it's your job to feed them. So that's the attitude. It's like that, thinking that everybody is your child, and you walk out the door with the thought, if I meet the opportunity, what can I give? That's right. It's like cultivating that view quietly according to our capacity. Yes, exactly.
Okay. When you talked about, this struck me when you talk about every person that you meet of having some karmic connection.
That's right.
Part of that when you're meeting strangers.
Yes.
Like kind of like the cliche saying of strangers are friends you haven't met yet. But would that be like a daily applicable way to have good connections with people?
I don't quite get that point. Say it a bit more.
Like at my job, I'm always meeting strangers, and
yes.
I try to think about every time I see somebody, I'm like, I want to treat everybody like a friend. Eventually, I want to lead them to enlightenment.
No, very much. No, that attitude, that's particularly called developing the attitude of equanimity, where you know that whether it's a friend, an enemy, or a stranger, they're all coming from the same place, all want to be happy, all don't want to suffer. And if we can start to see people like that, I know the Dalai Lama always says, because he meets millions of people, he always says, whenever I meet anybody, I feel like, the Dalai Lama says, whenever I meet anybody, I feel like they're my best friend. So yes, that's amazing attitude. Of course it is, darling. Of course it is. Because the fact is, using the view of karma, anybody you meet, they're not just random events. They're not random. And this is where it's quite shocking to us in our culture. We don't think this way. We think life is just random. Things happen. But there's no way in the universe you'd even lay eyes on somebody if you hadn't met them in the past. So from that attitude, you can see there's karmic connections. Yes. So you cultivate that view, even just of being their friend. That's amazing. Just in passing in the day. Hello, good morning. How are you? You might never see them again the rest of your life. You gave them some kindness. Absolutely, darling. Absolutely. Or, but you be wise. If it's the rapist, you've met that rapist before, but you don't, you can say good morning to you, but you do what you can to be sensible. Do you understand? Beth? Yes? Good. Well done, girl. Okay, honey child, you see this it's gone. It's 55 minutes, gone like a dream. But we covered a lot of material. It's one advantage of talking fast. We sow lots of karmic seeds. Why don't we just do a little meditation to finish? Just be very natural, very relaxed, very normal. Just simply close your eyes, sit up straight so you don't go off to sleep. And simply we're going to watch our thoughts. This is part of Mahamudra meditation. Just don't puzzle about what it is you're trying to do. Just simply sit there and pay attention, strong determination, not to space out. Try to pay attention to whatever thoughts pop up. It sort of feels peculiar sometimes, but don't worry. Just try to pay attention to whatever thoughts pop up. Don't hold on to the thoughts. Don't try to analyze them. Don't argue with them. Just watch them. It's like watching television with there's no commentary. Just watch. Simply pay attention to your thoughts with strong determination not to space out. Be very focused. Keep your mind alert. Just watch second by second. Let the thoughts come and go. All right, then, that's it. A little hour used well, all these thoughts, sow the seeds, nourish these seeds from the second forward, and try to see the specific point of the bodhisattva path is you try to think, the mother one is a good example, that you're a mother. So if you see your child, you're not looking around wondering who's going to feed them for breakfast. You know it's your job. So it's like the job description of a bodhisattva. Of course, if we're not capable, if we're overwhelmed by our own misery and needs, don't be ridiculous, but begin with this wish to think this way. Thinking, what can I do? How can I help? It's a profound thought, I tell you. Okay, darlings, much love. So happy. Thank you for all the questions. Happy to see you all, everybody. Okay, so much love. See you next time.
Venerable Robina.
Bye, sweethearts. Bye,
Thank you, Venerable Robina.
darling.